Here today on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, we're catching up with Dr. Justin Glisan, the state climatologist here in the state of Iowa. Justin, thanks for coming back on the program. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brent. Nice to be with you and always great to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's been a couple months since we last talked. Maybe catch us up to speed what you've been working on here throughout the winter.
Yeah, so we've been, winter is the driest season for the state of Iowa, December, January, February, meteorological winter. So we do typically see dry conditions. We've been in a weak La Nina phase, which is the cold phase of what everybody knows as El Nino. And basically what that means is cold sea surface temperatures in the Pacific pushing thunderstorm activity further west in the basin, and that impacts where the jet stream sets up over the United States and hence where the storm track is. Now, we've had a pretty dry winter. It's probably the top 15th driest with 150 years of records. February was a top 15 driest February also. So we have seen drought conditions expand across the state basically over the last several weeks. So we are in a larger extent of D0, which is that abnormally dry category, to D1. This is the largest extent that we've seen since June.
Any worries right now as we are coming up on the growing season? Planters are going to be rolling here pretty soon, Justin. So is this something that farmers are really paying attention to, these drought conditions?
It's not as impactful in wintertime when we do see dry conditions, which is, it's beneficial. The soils are frozen to an extent. So any snowpack melt that we were seeing would typically just run off. It wouldn't soak into the soils. I was out field scouting a few days ago and doing some soil probing. The frost level is deep in central Iowa, but we have seen thawing of soils near the surface. So any kind of rainfall that we do get moving forward will infiltrate and start to melt those or thaw those deeper soils that are frozen. I don't really see any cause for concern right now. We do see in the outlooks for the short term and for the March in general, higher probabilities of wetter conditions, which would be great. Now, we don't want to get a soaker or weeks of soaking rainfalls that delay us from getting the combines out in the fields in April. And we've seen wet springs in 2018 and 2019. We'd prefer a spring like we saw in 2020 or even 2021. But right now, yes, we're short on subsoil moisture. We could definitely use more. But it's better we're in a better condition than we were last year, I would say.
Yeah, that was going to lead right into my next question. How would you compare to where we were last year at this time? Because I remember last spring going into planting season, there was a lot of concern with the drought conditions in the state. And it seemed like overall the crops did end up holding up surprisingly well throughout the growing season and into harvest. So maybe just talk about that correlation there from this year to last year.
Yeah, correlation is a great word. Let's talk about that. So we have a lot of people on ag social media that talk about correlations between winter precipitation and spring precipitation. There is no correlation there. Winter behavior does not dictate what the spring will give us in terms of precipitation. So that's number one. Number two, last year we had D2 and D3 drought across western Iowa. Subsoil moisture percentiles were at the 5th percentile or below. And what that means is if you think of a sponge as the 100th percentile, a soaked sponge, there was 95% capacity in the subsoil profile for more moisture. So we definitely have more moisture in the tank to work off of this year. Again, we are short on topsoil and subsoil moisture, but the outlooks do give us at least some silver lining here in terms of the potential for rainfall moving forward. Yeah, and you mentioned yields last year in harvest. We were very dry in spring last year. April, May, and June, the 3 wettest months of the year, we were pretty dry. We were below average. So we saw drought conditions expand. We saw moisture stress on corn and beans even through June, July, and August. We did get those timely rainfall, those $1 million rainfalls right when we needed them. particularly during tasseling and pollination for corn. So it really held the crop off as we did see drier conditions. And then we had the 8th wettest October on record, which held us off in terms of expanding drought and actually getting moisture into the subsoil. Then we get into December, a very warm month, 15th warmest December on record. Most of the precipitation that fell was rainfall. And then we had the serial derecho on the 15th with a tornado outbreak, the record tornado outbreak for the state for any month. So we really did start to rebound that subsoil moisture. So overall, conditions are looking much better than last year, but we really will tell the tale getting into March and April to see the rainfall potential that we have.
I feel like the area that had the most drought type conditions was Northwest Iowa last year. That seemed to be a big focus throughout the growing season and into the fall. Justin, do you think Northwest Iowa is going to be dealing with some of those same issues again?
We have seen Northwest Iowa move back into that D0, D1 category over the last week. But if you remember this time last year, we had D3 drought up there. And as a reminder, we work on the drought categories on a, let's say, 100-year basis. So we would not expect a D3 drought for a given location more than once in 30 to 50 years. So that's a particularly dry regime to be in to get into D3 drought. We actually saw a pretty good rebound in northwestern Iowa where we saw D3 conditions, actual drought removal into the fall of 2021. So it just tells you how fast the pendulum swings back and forth in terms of wetness and dryness. So right now we're not seeing any indications that that northwestern corner of the state, which has been the driest part of the state going back in 14 to 16 months, precipitation deficits on the order of 8 to 12 inches. We don't see it swinging back into that dried category. But again, springtime will really give us an idea of where we're moving, given the rainfall potential ramping up climatologically March, April, May, and June.
And Justin, as we wind down here today, you might again just hit on some of those long-term outlooks. What are the models showing could develop here throughout the state?
Yep. So what we're seeing in the longer term outlooks, and when we say longer term, we're talking monthly to seasonal. Those March outlooks are showing basically an equal chance in the temperature field. So equal chance of above, below, or near average temperatures for March. On the precipitation front, as I mentioned, we are seeing an elevated signal for wetter conditions, and that's a good signal to have in March. Seasonally, March, April, May, we're seeing elevated probabilities of warmer temperatures, and then not a real clear signal, again, that equal chance category for precipitation, above, below, or near average conditions. Now, we are seeing a semblance of the La Nina signature starting to recede in the Pacific, and what that would suggest are near to slightly above average precipitation behavior in the Ohio Valley into the Great Lakes. And we see that probability start to slightly move west towards Iowa. But again, we're right in the middle of that interface. So at least in climatology and atmospheric science cap putting on for me, the amount of precipitation we get in March and April will really give us an idea of the thunderstorm potential that we have for the growing season. If we have more moisture available at the surface and in the lower atmosphere, we're more able to fuel those thunderstorms, get more precipitation, and enhance the subsoil moisture profiles that we have as we start to see our crop come out of the ground.
Justin, always great insights. Always like having you on the program. For farmer listeners, want any more information from your office, what's the best way they can reach out or stay connected with your work?
Yes, so always a pleasure to speak with you, Brent, and to your audience. Google Iowa Climatology Bureau. That'll bring you to our Iowa Department of Agriculture's website. We have all the outlooks, the drought monitor, historical reports. Shoot me an email, justin.glisan@iowaagriculture.gov. Or give me a phone call, 515-281-8981. Always happy to chat, always happy to provide information. Weather is a hot topic across the state, so we're always ready, willing, and able to get out and chat about it.
Well, we're looking forward to the next time, Justin. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Looking forward to it. Take care.
Again, that's State Climatologist Dr. Justin Glisan here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Brent Barnett.